Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you might be in the world today. And welcome to today's HDI's B Chapter meeting titled Better Support Through Automation. Today's webinar is sponsored by Supportcom. A few logistics before we get started. My name is Rob Evelyn, and I'm a V Chapter board member, and I'll be covering a few housekeeping rules before we get launched into our presentation today. If you experience any difficulty with the webinar itself, you can get help by clicking on the yellow question mark at the bottom of your screen. You can participate in Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast. Click on the red Q&A button and just type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the video window, then click Submit. At this time, please remember to disable any of your pop-up blockers. During our business section of the chapter meeting today, we will be using the Q&A session to answer some of our questions, so please be sure you're familiar with that functionality. You can also chat with others who are attending the meeting today. Click on the group chat button at the bottom right of your screen. We love having you exchange your ideas during this webinar. These slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You can also download a copy of the slides by clicking the Download Slide button located in the presentation window. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please visit our help guide by clicking on the help link below the media player. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the webcast help guide. There are a couple ways that you can contact us. You can contact us on our website at hdivchapter.com, via Facebook, Twitter, and of course in LinkedIn. You can ask a question, you can read a blog, or find a solution. So as I said, my name is Rob Evelyn. I've been in IT for about 35 years now, and I am currently the V Chapter Vice President of Programs. So before we get into our main presentation, we're going to talk about some V Chapter business that we need to discuss. And the first thing is always an exciting time for me, and it's the HDI Awards. Each year, HDI presents a couple of awards, and the awards that we're going to offer up are the Analyst of the Year and the Desktop Support Technician of the Year. You can nominate somebody by visiting ThinkHDI/awards, or you can directly email me. My email address is on the screen, or you can use one of our other ways of communicating with us to submit a nomination. These nominations will be reviewed by a panel, and our winners will be announced in our October meeting. We suggest that you get your nominations in quickly because hopefully we'll have a lot of good candidates to review this year. Last year, actually, one of my technicians won the award, and it's Jesus Romanda. So please get your nominations in by visiting the ThinkHDI website, contacting me directly, or through one of our other avenues or officers. So we got exciting times coming up. The HDI chapter is changing. We have been funded by HDI for the last 2 years as a virtual chapter. In 2016, HDI V Chapter will become a full-fledged standalone HDI chapter like all of the other chapters located throughout the country. Today, all the content that you're presented during these V Chapter meetings are sponsored by HDI directly. In 2016, we will need to take over this responsibility of finding our sponsors, talking about what's interesting to our chapter members, and also provide the funding as any other chapter does. So the advantages to this are V chapter members will drive all the content. We'll decide as a chapter what we want to preview, what we want to talk about, and how to do that. The V chapter also becomes financially self-sufficient. We will have to find our own funding through sponsors or other means to keep the chapter up and running. We will also need to get a full complement of officers. Today we do have some of these officers in place, but we're looking to you, our members, to become officers and to become involved in the chapter. We will need a president. Christy Trice is moving on this year. She's been our president for the last couple of years. We will need a vice president of finance, communications, programs, memberships, and sponsorship and content. These positions are well documented on the Think HDI website, and we'll have more discussions about them as this evolution continues. We find that this is going to be an exciting time for the chapter to really become self-sufficient and to serve more people throughout the world, possibly. So we've been talking about this for the last couple of officer meetings on how we're going to do this and what this means. But it's become very clear that we need to get some input from you, our members. So we have a couple of polling questions for you to answer and respond to, and we'll share the results of those polling questions. But at the end of the day, we need to decide how we want to move this chapter forward, and we need to get our members more involved. So we're going to put up a few polling questions and ask you to respond. The first polling question is, do you like the meeting formats we are using today? This is primarily a one-way conversation with our members where the team puts together a presentation and presents it. The sponsors share in this responsibility. And do you like this format or not? So go ahead and answer those questions. Click yes if you like to keep the format the same, or no, you'd like to see something different. We got a really fast response back from everybody with 99% of the votes in. It looks like 95% of you really liked our formats today. That's quite interesting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The next question is, if the meetings were more interactive, would you be more likely or less likely to attend? Please go ahead and make your choice that you would be more likely to attend, less likely to attend, or I don't need the meetings to be any more interactive. So I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and answer those questions. Okay, it looks like it's pretty much a 50-50 split. Some people would like the meetings to be more interactive. They'd be more likely to attend. And a good majority of you like the meetings to be less interactive. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about this in the past on how could we make the meetings more proactive or interactive. That's quite interesting, the results here. Okay, for this question, I'd like for you to use the Q&A capability of the system to be able to answer your questions. So just go into the Q&A box and type in how you think it can be more interactive, what features you would like to use. So just go into Q&A and just type in what you would like to see done to make the meetings more interactive. I'll give you all a few minutes to do that. So some of the responses we have so far are a live video feed, the ability to raise your hand and to ask a question to get more involved, and some real-time group chat. Okay, I'll give you all just a few more minutes to come up with some ideas, but we're getting some really good responses back in our Q&A section. So some of the other things coming in is open up the ability to pre-submit questions. That's a good, interesting one. If we do a better job at broadcasting the topics, then you could pre-submit questions to our sponsors and presenters. With more group chat. We have one suggestion that would like us to do more time on the content early, so we're not trying to hurry up and ask questions at the end of the meeting. Just a few more minutes and then we'll go on to the next one. But I'm really seeing a lot of responses and I appreciate that. Okay, so this is a question and it kind of goes in line with some of the responses that we have back on the other question is, would you like to see more video enhance the meetings? So I'll give everyone just a few seconds to answer that, but initially we have 100% of the votes saying yes, that you believe that video would help enhance the meeting. I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to chime in on this one. Again, the question is, would adding video enhance our meetings? Okay, so our results say that 84% of you think that adding video would enhance our meetings. And I know to a lot of you sitting there thinking about this, these are just numbers, but this is good information that the board can use to help better plan our direction moving forward and how we can make this more meaningful to you. I've been involved a lot lately in some of the local chapters and seeing how they're holding their meetings and how they're doing it geographically, which is our biggest challenge. So here's a question. If we had an in-person social event or meeting somewhere, how likely would you be to attend? In other words, if we were to have an event where the V chapter would get together, would you attend this event or not? And again, I'll just give you all a few more seconds to respond to this question. We talked about this in our chapter meetings. How would this be possible? How could we make it cost efficient for people to attend? Because in talking to other chapters, a lot of people seem to depend on that, in-person reactions. Okay, so looking at our results, 58% of you would try to attend depending on the cost, and 35% of you would not. Thank you for those answers. And this seems to be a duplicate of our last slide, so we're just going to skip over that. So one of the criteria for a very successful chapter is to have people involved. Would you be interested in serving on a board position? And if so, what positions? And how else could you help out? If you couldn't help out in the positions, what are some of the things that you could help at? So for this question, please use the Q&A box as you did in the few slides ago. And I'll give you all a few minutes to go ahead and answer here. So again, we're looking would you be would you be interested in being an active part of planning the meetings, the finances, and all those other positions that a chapter requires in order to run? One of the ideas that came back earlier was that we could have a V-Chapter meeting on-site at HDI conference. We did have a lunch table at the conference this year, but maybe that's a great idea, is to specify a couple of hours just for the V-Chapter to get together. So at this point, this really concludes the business aspect of our meeting for the V-Chapter. Again, we appreciate all your feedback on these polls, and we'll be getting together to determine the next steps for the V-Chapter and how we move forward in 2016. And again, thank you for all your feedback. So first up today, we will hear from our sponsor, Support.com. Joining us today is Sampath Gautam. Sampath joined Support.com as Senior Vice President of Product in September 2014. In February of 2015, he was appointed to the Continental Automated Buildings Association, otherwise known as CABA, Board of Directors. He brings over 20 years of experience as a product and business leader in the software industry. Prior to Support.com, Sampath spent almost 5 years at the Citrix SaaS division, which he held multiple product and general management roles, including VP and General Manager for the Collaboration Product Group. He has run product management and services and has been a General Manager at enterprise software companies such as SAP, Commerce One, Click Commerce. Sampath earned his bachelor's in engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and his MBA from Santa Clara University. Sampath, welcome to the HDI V-Chapter, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. On behalf of Support.com, I want to thank the HDI V-Chapter leadership for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this webinar, as well as this opportunity to take a few minutes of time with this audience of technical service and support professionals. I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about Support.com, just to give you an idea of who we are, tell you a little bit about our products, and also make the tie-in to the theme of the conversation today, which is how do you use automation and what is the role of automation to provide greater, better support that we are all striving for in this audience. Again, my name is Sampath Gautam. I head up the product team for Support. So just real briefly, Support.com has been around for a while. We've been public since 2000. We actually run a virtual contact center. We have contact center agents, home-based contact center agents throughout North America, primarily based in North America. And we provide both services. So we actually provide white label services, contact center tier 2, tier 3 support for brands, for major brands, telco brands, retail brands, and so on. That's kind of our DNA. And more recently, we have also become a provider of cloud-based, SaaS-based software. So our unique expertise is really supporting technology in complex environments. We really believe that end consumers want technology to work the way it's supposed to. And we are in the business of providing services to help them get there, or provide software that allows our customers' support organization to deliver that kind of experience. We do more than 20,000 tech support interactions every day, and provide the DNA really is around deep technical support, complex technical support, And as we have done this for many customers over the years, a couple of years back, as we look back and looked at the technology that we use internally, we realized that we have a significant opportunity, and our customers are also asking for this, to actually provide the software that we use, the technology that we use, as a service or as a product that they can use for their internal support organization. And that's when we created the Nexus product. So the Nexus product is really very focused on what we call the support interaction problem, the support interaction optimization problem. So we're not in the business of CRM or ticketing. What we really do is we identified the area around the interaction between a consumer and an agent and that black box, and shedding light and visibility to that black box. It's the knowledge, the policies, the delivery of that knowledge to enhance services is what Nexus does. So real quick, Nexus, the core of Nexus, you can think about Nexus as a GPS for technical support teams. Nexus has a set of what we call guided paths, very powerful, easy, no IT required, knowledge creators in a support organization can build this very quickly. You look at your top call drivers, create guided paths for them, and provide these to the agents. The agents get on a call, use these guided paths like a GPS, lets them get to where they want to be. It's not very prescriptive scripting tools. It's very open-ended and has powerful tools like remote control, the ability to get data from the end user's devices, the ability to push automation, which we think is really important to deliver the service during that interaction. And it's very open, connected, and we get tons of analytics on the details of the process to be able to refine your content and deliver better service as you move forward. That's the core of what Nexus does. It's all about getting the content and the right content to the right people at the right time. So today we do it on the agent side, and we're just launching into self-service as well, so that the end users can have access to this kind of guidance, where the end user experience is great, it's very engaging, and they're able to guide themselves through the support content to solve their own problems. So Support.com for Nexus has a larger vision around thinking about support, about technical support, and it plays into a couple of themes that Ken is going to be talking about in terms of automation. So when we think about automation and when we think about guidance that you need to provide to both the end user and the agents, we think about support as not just break fix. It's about this larger set of issues that customers have about getting value from the product. And I think you'll hear this theme throughout today's talk. It's about understanding what the end consumer wants to do with the product or service that they bought, and what is the outcome that they're trying to achieve, what is the value that they're trying to get from the product. It's not only when they have a problem that they need to call support, but support should be there as an integral part of their customer journey. Support needs to be there when they want help with adoption, when they want help with education on the product. It should be embedded in their experience of the product itself. They need to have an engaging step-by-step guidance. The support tool should have context to enhance the value of the support interaction. And there needs to be continuous optimization of the content and the delivery as well. And needless to say, in multiple channels, right? Whether it's mobile, whether it's web, whether it's chat or voice, or different omni-channel experiences that the end consumer might have. So that's, in a nutshell, what Support.com does. We have services. We have a software as a service product called Nexus. We have recently launched it a couple of quarters in, great traction, and the larger vision is what is stated really on the slide, is about focusing on the customer journey, providing a guided experience, and optimizing continuously. And automation is a key part of every single piece that Nexus provides to the support organizations. So with that, I would like to thank the HDI team once again, and I would like to turn it over now to the featured speaker, or back to Rob, and I guess Rob will introduce the featured speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sampath, and that was a lot of good information, and we were glad that you were here as well. Before we move on to our Better Support Through Automation presentation, I just want to remind everybody that you can still use the Q&A function to answer some of the polling questions, so please keep them coming in. And we are saving the questions that are being asked to Sampath and to Ken for the end of this presentation, so stick around for those questions. So now on to the presentation, Better Support Through Automation. Discussing today's topic is Ken Gonzalez, Managing Partner at Engage Consulting Incorporated. Having system software design and cross-lifecycle delivery experience at all organizational levels, Ken Gonzalez brings significant technical and business leadership skills to his Engage Consulting Incorporated. From an individual contributor to executive management, Ken provides advisory and technical consultant services that focus on the point where service management, personal and organizational development, and data center technology initiatives converge. With more than 25 years of experience in the industry, Ken is recognized as an industry expert and leader, and he is regularly invited to write and give presentations for organizations all around the world. So Ken, welcome to HDI V Chapter, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. Let's just play down the number of years I've been in the business, okay? Because that's, I wouldn't say it's a sore subject with me, but I certainly don't feel like I've got 25 years in, or even actually longer than that. So, good day, everybody. Thanks for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of this with you. I intend to have this be very conversational, so I'm not going to read slides to you. We're going to talk about things, and I'm hoping I'm going to leave a sufficient amount of time to actually let you ask questions and get to some of those as we go along. I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you, so just buckle in and let's go. Okay, the first one I'll offer is just a couple provisos about where the content comes from, and most of today's content is actually being sourced out of something called the Universal Service Management Body of Knowledge. And it's, if you haven't heard of it yet, go to usmbok.com and check it out. Lots of great stuff there. Okay, moving on to that. We're talking better support through automation. The key point in this hashtag, or excuse me, on this slide is the hashtag for the tweets. So if you want to share something, go ahead and put the hashtag on it, and if I can actually catch that on Twitter in near real time, I'll happily do that. If I can't, well, we can certainly do that afterwards. I am also a very socially connected person, so you'll find me a lot on social media. You're welcome to contact me there, and I'll make sure you got all my 411 on that later. Okay, about me, you already talked about that. That's enough. That's my face. Let's start off with a poll here. So, and I'm intending for the polls to actually be a little bit of an opportunity for you to kind of reflect on your current circumstances and the way that you offer support. I think that's important because I don't think that a lot of times we actually, we get so caught up in the day-to-day of the challenges we've got in running support organizations that we don't necessarily take the time out to raise our head above the parapet and consider our key issues. So from your organization, what does your customer say about how well you execute and your ability to execute? So if you would toss in a couple, toss in your responses on that. Give you just a minute or so to do the poll. Okay, we should have some stuff coming in here. Okay, looks like we have a lot of good feedback coming in. Most of you are saying that more often than not I get what I need, so that's what your customer says. That's actually pretty encouraging. I like hearing that. Always a positive experience, and they're your average support organization in a distant third at about 10.2%. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll close out on that. Get back to my tab here. Okay. So thank you for your responses there. Our next poll question: how would you characterize how your customer views your response orientation? So let's have a look at that. Whether you're very proactive, like you're continually looking for opportunities to serve them better, or you're very reactive. You spend most of your time actually firefighting and very little looking at the future of where your support organization is going and investing in how you can actually help make that experience better, or I'm somewhere in the middle. So let's see what we got here. So let's just keep this open a little bit more. Okay, very good. So it looks like our clear winner here is the middle of the road, 38.4% of you, followed by somewhat proactive, 30.7%, and then somewhat reactive, followed by 23%, with the stragglers less than 5% and less for very reactive, very proactive, very reactive. That's not a bad outcome, I don't think. So the thing I really do like about it is that we have some people out there who are trying to take and make things happen, and I realize that it can be tough, especially in resource-constrained environments and where priorities continually change from day to day. So great work on that front. Now, here's another question, another poll for you, but we're going to take it from a little bit of a different perspective. So rather than just looking at it from a customer perspective, think about this from your management's perspective. How would they rate how well you're doing with regards to your ability to be proactive or as a reactive organization? Let's give that a minute or so. And whenever you consider the question, how well are you performing, I would encourage you to actually consider this from the perspective of that there are actually multiple perspectives to satisfy. So you've got an internal stakeholder perspective, you've got your management's perspective, you've got your customer's perspective. You might also have some other perspectives that, depending upon your organization, there might be a regulatory body that you need to please, and there's a requirement that you do the things that they need to demonstrate that you're getting the job done for them. Okay, so let's call it quits on that and have a look at what the numbers say. Okay, so your management's viewing you actually somewhat proactive. 35.5 is the leader. Middle of the road, 31.1. Somewhat reactive, 26.6. And then very few of you, like 0%, nobody's in the very proactive, and just a few stragglers down in the very reactive. So I think that it's important to consider the delta between how your customer views you and how your management views you. Why is that so? Well, I'll get to that in just a little bit, but it's needless to say an important aspect of it that we want to consider. Okay, so we're going to start out and we're going to address the status quo. I think one of the things you can do to serve yourself and your customer better is to ask yourself the question, what business are we in? And the second question that's related to that, how do you help your customers be successful? The third question you might want to ask along with that is, how well are we actually doing? So what does your customer think about the support that you give them to do that? When we talk about strategy from a service management or a service support perspective, we always want to take and look at it from this filter. This is an outside-in perspective. This is going off of what the customer says about what we do and how we do it. Now, this might seem like a who's buried in Grant's tomb answer, but I can assure you that it's not. The difference is, and this question was first posed by Mr. Ted Levitt, who was the former editor-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review. It comes from an article called Marketing Myopia. And his point was that any time an industry suddenly found itself getting displaced, for example, the railroads back in the old days, when it came times for the trucking firms to start carrying parcels and packages cross-country, the railroads thought they had a sure hold on it because they thought, oh, we move packages from point A to point B, as opposed to considering themselves as a provider of logistics solutions. It gives you an entirely different way to think about who you are and what you do for your customer. Another commonly cited example is Disneyland. Everybody's familiar with the Walt Disney theme parks. And if we were to say, well, what business is Disneyland in? You might be tempted to say, oh, Disneyland or the Disney company operates theme parks. Well, actually, if you talk to Disney, you'll find out that no, it isn't the operation of theme parks. Theme parks are a means towards helping people have memorable vacations, memorable family outings. So this is the kind of shift in thinking that we want to get into from a support perspective, because if we just think that we're out doing break fix, we're doing neither ourselves or the customer a good service. And partially, I think this is actually based in a historical identity crisis, which we're in the process over the past few years of now getting resolved. The old way of looking at it is that we got pocket protectors, geeky people walking around fixing apps and servers and stuff that falls over during the night, as opposed to the new view, which is somebody that's actually partnered up with the business that they're a part of. And that's an important part of the equation, thinking of it not as though IT is separate from the organization. Because even if you are providing a service for somebody on a for-fee basis, the fact of the matter is that you are out to help the customer do the things that they need to do. That's the business that you're in. You serve your customers. So it doesn't matter whether you're internal or external, that view still holds. And that view has not been, let's say, rapidly moved upon within inside of traditional IT organizations. We still have the view that what we're actually doing is monitoring, maintaining servers and software or infrastructure for our organization or for whoever we consider our customer to be. And then we do it at the highest possible quality for the lowest possible cost. Those of you who suffered through an ITIL Foundation class can probably recognize that phrase. Well, I would assert that that's actually a very bad basis on which to act, rather than the new view, which is organized around, hey, we enable business results and we provide technical leadership. So we are one with the business. And we do that to get it at the right quality at the right cost for the business. So it's not highest and lowest. No, actually, a service provider even wants to be a little bit selfish about it and charge just a little bit more. That way they can actually have the amount of headroom that they need to invest in future innovations that will serve the business well. And as we take a look at this, there's basically from the old view, these are the kinds of things we hear people saying. Oh, those customers, they just don't understand. They don't know what it takes. They. Look, you hear the words I'm using? It's not we, it's a they. It's those people. Those people are the problem. You hear that a lot in development shops. Can't we just train those users better? Okay, anything that sounds like that, that's coming from the old view. The new view should be organized around thinking about our, we, and you as a part of that combined whole. So we want to help anticipate changes and help you navigate them. We want to help you get maximum value from the products and services that we acquire. We want to make sure it's a fit for the mission and that we actually can get good value from it. So that's a shift in orientation. And to be able to do this, we need to be able to distinguish the old from the new. So here you can see some examples of the words. So the identifications in this are organized around us, I, they, them. So that's all the historical stuff. The we, you, and our is how we would speak if we are actually a part of that business. In the old model, the things you know the things you do and the things you can understand are actually things that are valued. But in the new view, we actually want to look at what are those things we can lead, communicate, and accomplish. If you stay stuck in the old view, I guarantee you that you're going to end up being painted a target on your back and become somebody that can actually get outsourced, because somebody's going to turn that into a commodity capability and they're not going to be able to afford you. You'll lose the opportunity to play. By being a value-generating asset and continually focusing on looking at how we generate value, you're now becoming an asset overall to the organization and building yourself a longer-term future. Okay, so this leads us to being able to talk a little bit about next-generation service support. So as Sampath was talking about with regards to break-fix is probably the entry point for everybody because it contains the minimum number of elements that we need to be able to consider. So there's customer satisfaction, there are the interactions we have on a regular basis, and there's the service support experience as well as break-fix. So this is what we're used to doing. You take a ticket in, you get rid of a ticket. That's how you get happy people. You fix it in a way that minimizes the impact and gets them back operational, what they want to be doing. Now, the next stuff that we want to pay attention to is stuff that doesn't often get taken into consideration, but by focusing on it in your organization, you have yourself a better chance of making yourself relevant as part of that, that new view, somebody who's actually a key partner to the business. So you've got a customer engagement strategy. And the thing you want to leave with this is that the way that you interact with the customer is not random. Guarantee you, for every one of these different types of strategies that you've got, and these are operating strategies, you can have a playbook set up so that when you're looking at implementing it, you don't have to use genius level thinking to solve routine tasks. No, for each of them, come up with a set of key plays. So when this comes up, what are you going to do? And this is actually where it fits into automation. Because for all of those key plays, you can actually start looking at how do I actually build that into my platform. So I can take the work off of the person who may be having to juggle a number of different balls to keep things moving forward, and you want to enhance their ability to engage and get the work done. Okay, so with that, let's move on and consider the next one. The helping hand. The helping hand strategy is actually very, very valuable, and a lot of you already do this, but don't give yourself enough credit for being able to do it. What do I mean by helping hand? Well, maybe the training that people are receiving for their services isn't sufficient to allow them to use their software, or maybe there's something about the process that they don't quite understand. This is where support comes in, where, hey, look, I've seen this before, I can help you through it. You get to be not only the shoulder that they lean on, but you also get to provide them the expertise they need to be able to get on to doing the rest of what they need to do. Okay, so the 4 E's. The 4 E's are your experience, the way that you engage, all about how it's the core of service management, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay. Service recovery. Excuse me. Service recovery is actually a very important portion. Most people think about it as though, oh, somebody took and messed up my flight, and now I've got to take and deal with somebody giving me a voucher for free airfare because that's actually what's going to have things supposedly repair the customer relationship. Well, I'm sorry. It doesn't. That can work, but it has to be very specific and to the context. So an important part of the service recovery is not just having something that, from a monetization standpoint, the customer feels is actually worth their being inconvenienced, but it has to show the customer that you really care. Giving him something free on the top of somebody that's actually ticked off at you is not an effective customer recovery. You're pandering to them. So a customer recovery strategy is actually an important part of what we need to pay attention to. As well as complaint and compliment. In this regard, I think we're actually our own worst enemies, because when we build and implement systems, especially ones that are customer-facing with regards to support, we want to take the time and actually build both a complaint and a complement capability, because this is, number one, a means for us to be able to determine how well we're doing in the eyes of the customer. And quite frankly, it's easy for people to call and complain. It really is. We do it all the time. People do it to us all the time. But how about compliments? How about when something's going really well? I do this on a fairly regular basis. I will actually call up people's support line and give them good feedback. I did this actually with a large chain of convenience stores. And the person on the other end of the phone was flabbergasted. She didn't have a means of being able to record that there was a happy customer that wanted to talk about an associate at one of their locations. Things like that kind of make my day, makes it fun. And I would assert that it does for your employees as well. Now, all this that comes out of the interaction layer ends up going into the operational processes and gets cycled back around and informs our customer engagement strategy. So all the key moving parts inside of your service management system, of which support's an integral element, start getting informed and shaped by all of the stuff that's happening. I don't think that there's enough organizations today that actually recognize the true fit of support the way that it actually is today. You are on the front lines. You are getting the actual data that people are interested in, and we need to have actually more investment in support, specifically because it's good business intelligence. It's not just about the closing of tickets. But if you're doing all of these things, you're able to provide insight into how customers are behaving, what are the places they're having trouble with, what are new opportunities to invest in technology that will actually help them. You people are the folks who are well positioned to be able to do that. So I'd like you to take and think about, so we talked about some strategies here. If you had to go to work on one of them, what do you think you would actually take on and get you the most direct customer benefit? So let's get the poll fired off here. You can submit your answers. We'll give it just a few. Okay, and let's have a look at the results. Let's see what we got here. Okay, well, hey, it turns out that most of you believe that if you had one to go start working on today, Helping Hand would be the one that you go for, with about 58.3%, service recovery at 16.6%, followed by break fix, 11.1%. And the 4Es at 11.1. So that's not bad, and complaint and compliment at 2.7. I really like the fact that people are responding well to Helping Hand, because it actually is a key piece of leverage that you can use that does not require you do a lot different. I would actually have you consider that from a platform perspective, how can you take and log? How can you track? How can you monitor what you're doing on a Helping Hand perspective, both from a topical perspective, the outcomes perspective, as well as the number of discrete calls? Because think about it. This actually could be a very nice tie-in to your knowledge management strategy and doing your knowledge-centered support activities. So you can actually get a couple of pretty good benefits from considering it from that perspective. Okay, so the essence of this universal service management, which is where the 4Es come from, is looking at it from the service encounter, the expectations that are set when they engage with you, the actual service experience, and then what I like to refer to as the emotional genie. Because the emotional genie, once it pops and you get somebody that's upset, it's very hard to get the genie back into the bottle. So we actually want to try to prevent the genie from doing that. But, you know, given its life, it's hard to do that every time. And then those map along with the two vital service equations, which is the value equation, where we're comparing what we're getting, and this is from a customer perspective, what the customer's getting in terms of their output, the key results, the things that they need, compared to the cost. So if you end up costing too much for the perceived value, you have a problem, either as a service provider or a support organization. And then expectations is the thing that many of us really tend to take and screw up. Why? Well, even if we think about the value equation and say that, yes, we're giving them a good set of results for the amount that they're spending on it, if we're not actually doing it in a way that's satisfying to the customer, or number two, is actually meeting with their expectations. That could be in terms of timing. So there's either a qualitative or quantitative element to it. If we don't meet their expectations, then we're on the losing end of the equation. What I'm going to suggest is that for all of your service encounters, what we want to do is we want to manage off of this consumer scenario. And this is the level at which you want to take into your planning. So the consumer scenario consists of all the different information that you need to collect. So why are you looking for it? Well, who's the customer? What community what community do they represent? So we want to capture these different data elements because they're directly relevant to the kinds of things that we're doing, the kinds of things that they're doing, what they expect from us. And if we track this stuff, you're going to have a much better sense of, at any given point in time, what does this customer care about? How can you tailor your support strategy to actually meet what the customer really needs? Only by doing this kind of detailed analysis, and you can do it on a scenario-by-scenario basis. As a matter of fact, I will suggest that you have a catalog of consumer scenarios available to you and your organization to play off of. That way you can understand and have a better context for who's on the other end of the phone or on the other end of your log me in session or whatever technology you happen to be using for remote access. This does not have to be high tech, but again, this is another opportunity for automation. If you can automate it, so much the better, because now that knowledge is actually available to everybody else. This could be as simple as these questions on a paper sheet sitting in a binder somewhere. In some cases, that's the right business solution. As a matter of fact, you may want to do that to trial it and get started. But either way, the consumer scenario is where you want to start work, because that's what sets the context. Now, as far as the customer and service experience landscape goes, so we've got the things that we typically look at in terms of how the consumer interacts with us. That's called the consumer pathway. Everything gets driven by a service request to the organization, and then there's a provider response that they're going to take for every action that the consumer initiates. So there's going to be a mapping. That strip in the middle is actually pretty important to us because this tells us how we're doing. The sunshine means good, rain clouds mean bad. The heart, that actually means that we're talking about a moment of truth. These are the key interactions that your provider is going to look at, or excuse me, your customer is going to look at and say, you guys are great or you guys stink. That's where the decision is going to be made. Sure, we might have clouds out there because a service provider is not going to do everything perfectly. They can't provide a level of service which is we are spectacular at everything. Service providers, as part of the discipline, need to choose where they're going to fail. And specifically, that's because it doesn't impact the customer's view of who they are, right? So it's a trade-off. And we recognize that there are trade-offs and limitations that we need to pay attention to. Okay. Now, when things go boom is actually an important part for us, specifically because we're dealing with the customer recovery program here. So we start off with the set of service requests, and it's driving us towards the right. So we have a little box there that's just about in the middle where we find the zone of tolerance. So this zone is actually quite important for us because it tells us how far can we go to either side of what the customer expects and still have them think well of us. So that's, where we can see the rain clouds that we saw on the previous slide. So if it starts to go off, okay, we actually want to go down through and look at the different activities we can do in terms of, okay, what's our key plays around recovering the customer relationship? Because remember, the key point here is that we're trying to maintain and recover the customer relationship. Yeah, they might be upset, and there's not a lot you can do when somebody's upset other than to hear where they're at. But beyond that, you can actually do what you can to minimize the impact and not let that get out of control. Now, from the fit of automation perspective, we want to take a look at this from the fact that we're dealing with everything from the 4 layers inside of an organization on down. This happens to be the business, the service layer, where we actually define and manage services, the operations layer, that's the O. The O is where we actually put in place the processes that are required to actually make things happen, and the I is the service infrastructure. Now, this is actually the way that the triangle metaphor works. It's actually very important because we're dealing with the fact that as you go down, you have more stuff to manage, and you're also less flexible. So you actually have more ability to be agile at the business layer and the service layer than you do farther down into the triangle. And one of the things that we start talking about, come on, advance for me. Okay, is the fact that we have KPIs, we have SLAs, and we have operational metrics. That's what most of us talk about. But unfortunately, that's not quite enough. We have to take it a step further. Why do I say that? Well, there's actually key result areas that we need to pay attention to. There are service level objectives and service level indicators. And there are other operational metrics that help us actually tie together and build up an actual cascade of metrics, starting from the highest level stuff that the business wants to pay attention to, all the way down into the infrastructure. By paying attention to all these and building the connectivity, we can look at everything from the lowest level activity, what's happening at a machine, and then correlate that back up to the key results. Folks, you can design all the processes you want, but if you do not have a good set of tools to actually take and aggregate these data elements, you're going to be doing a lot of work trying to get basic blocking and tackling handled to understand how well you're doing in terms of your reportable metrics that go back to the business. And my key point here is that as you look at your platforms, you should be able to, for each of the key plays that we've talked about, think about, oh, how does that actually fit here in terms of the connectivity? I'll give you 2 pieces of planning advice that you can, that'll help you deal with this. The first is the business planning framework. These are the specific set of measures and planning elements that go into being successful in terms of being able to provision services for the business. Because this is actually helping us establish what's important to the customer, why it's important, and gives us a way of kind of setting the context for everything else that happens. So that's the business planning framework, broken out into 3 basic chunks. And then beyond that, we have the performance management framework. The performance management framework starts out with the key result areas, the things that we do that help the customer, and then drills down all the way into the lowest level operational metrics we can get our hands on. Now, these 2 frameworks actually work together. They may be 2, but they work together as one, because we actually want to connect the frameworks up. So we can see first off that we have our customer perspective represented by the business planning framework, and then the provider perspective, which is represented by the performance management framework. What we want to do is we want to stitch these together at these levels, and we can ask some orienting questions to help us understand how well we're doing. So on the left-hand side, what do I need? How can I get it? And how do I need to do it? Okay, so that's what the customer is going to ask. And then from a provider perspective, they're going to want to ask, oops, I have to go back. Sorry about that. from the provider perspective, these are the things the provider is going to do, and compare those to what the customer says. So we're trying to keep those two synced up so that we can see that any action the provider is going to take is going to tangibly impact the customer experience in a way that is going to add value. All of your key plays for each of those areas that you're going to take on should be geared to this. It's not hard to do. It's really not, but it does take some time. You have to sit down with a whiteboard, get your references together, and ask the questions. So in a couple hours for a given consumer scenario, you can actually go identify your key metrics, your key technologies, what you're doing. If it takes you longer than a couple hours, you're probably drilling down to an unacceptable level of detail. And then with regards to the supporting technology, so I call this my track model, TRC. So when we start thinking about what we want to do, normally we start off with a mind of, oh, I get it. I actually want a set of technology. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to look at speeds and feeds, I'm going to look at price, and I'm going to float that by somebody. Well, these days it's generally been pretty hard to get that kind of a sale done, internally that is. So what we actually want to do is actually kind of step back a little bit and take a different perspective. So yes, there is a technology in mind or a platform in mind that we might want to use. So we want to take a look at that from the perspective of that platform has certain capability or has certain requirements that it can satisfy. So the requirements it can satisfy are represented by its operational characteristics, not necessarily just by its speeds and feeds. But we want to take and primarily map those up to the tasks. These tasks are what we got from looking at the business planning framework, where we got to the vital activities, right? And those tasks can be organized by consumer scenario. Where we tie them together is in a statement of capability. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like in this next slide. So think about it as somebody that, oh, we want to be able to do X, okay? And what does the person have to do that, okay? So that's looking at it from a task view. So from a requirements perspective, you have a product that can do X, Y, and Z. The capabilities, that's where the important mapping comes in that doesn't often get done. So we want to be able to describe our tasks in terms of the key capabilities required to get the work done. In doing that, you'll actually do a better job of evaluating tool capabilities as well as your specific requirements that you go to a vendor with. And this is an important point because you actually want to do this first so that any provider you end up dealing with, you can actually help them go through and do an evaluation with you so that you can get an apples-to-apples comparison for the different things that you might want to acquire for your organization. So in terms of next steps, here's my recommendations to you. Number one, know your customer. Answer the key questions. What business am I in, and how do you help your customers be successful? Don't let that go. As a matter of fact, whenever possible, get your people dynamited out of their chairs and get them out in customer land, even for a little bit, just to get oriented so they have a personal connection to what you do as an organization. If you can only afford 1 or 2 people at a time, fine, do that. Bring them back to a break room, get your staff for a lunch and learn, and debrief it with them. That way you can get maximum benefit across the organizations. And also, if you can, time things. Find out what people do, how long it takes them, so you can understand the impact if something goes off. Okay, that'll also give you another good basis for metrics. The second one is make a list and check it. So build yourself a consumer scenario catalog. Think simple. Again, this is going to be a living, breathing, evolving kind of thing. And it's going to be one of the ways you can actually demonstrate to your customer that you're being proactive, because now you're actively looking for scenarios. Don't wait for a prime opportunity. You can start anywhere with anybody in your organization. Use those consumer scenario data elements that we talked about before and start collecting. It's worthwhile. Next one, understanding the services you provide. Well, that also may seem like it's obvious, but quite frankly, many of us actually don't have a good understanding of what we're trying to provide, so that by the time we actually start designing it, we might be designing the wrong thing. And I would say that we want to use the customer perspective for actually looking at what it is we're providing. I highly encourage you to look at it strictly from the customer's perspective. Use their language. Don't force them to try to learn terms that are funky for them. Think about it from their perspective. And that's actually one of the places where most people's service catalogs end up going off the deep end, is because people look at them and they'll say, I don't understand this. It doesn't relate to me. I don't need this. I don't use this. Well, the same happens here. So let's make sure we keep them on the same page. Consider what support you need. So quite frankly, yes, I am a consultant, and I firmly admit that. And there's a lot of work you can do on your own. But there may be certain things about how to design a service experience that you're not comfortable with. Just like if you're bringing a new technology in, there might be things that you're uncomfortable in dealing with or don't have the level of skill. If you find that's a case for you, then boom, go get help. And I don't care whether it's a training or mentoring basis or just somebody coming in and executing a task. Get the support you need when you need it. It's money well spent and time well invested that at the end of it, it'll probably leave you better able to deal with it next time than suffering through it. And whatever you do, don't get hung up on one particular framework. Look, the HDI's got great standards for support organizations, lots of great education. You've got publicly available frameworks like ITIL, USMBOK, COBIT. Use all of the tools at your disposal. Don't get wound around the axle or for being like an ITIL advocate or a COBIT advocate. Fact of the matter is, you got to select of what you have available to you and adopt and adapt for your organization. If you don't do that, you're leaving yourself vulnerable and not getting the right level of return from the tools you want to bring to bear. The next recommendation is build yourself a cross-functional team. And yes, this even includes the customer. The customer, if they see that you're actually doing stuff that's going to pay back for them, they're going to be very happy to take and participate. I've seen this time and time again. Customers love to be engaged when it's meaningful. If you want to go and talk techie stuff with them, maybe they're not going to be quite as willing to do that. But as far as your internal view, get as many of your technical specialists around you, especially when it comes to automation. You have a lot of resources. Use them well. And this represents looking at it like from a program team perspective. So this is the group that's responsible for looking at an automation initiative. So you're going to have some sort of executive sponsor that you're going to end up reporting to, right? And then your community in general, that's going to be who gets the benefit from as well as who's using those kind of tools. And then you have vendors, partners, and service providers, and your individual contributors and subject matter experts that you can engage on an ad hoc basis to help you along. The bottom line here is it takes all sorts of people to make a successful automation initiative work. Don't try to do it on your own. You make it harder and you increase your chances of failure. Let's increase your chance of success. Continuous improvement starts today. I think that as we start looking at the new model for next generation service support, a key element of it is that continuous improvement is the foundation for it all. This is not the same as continuous service improvement in ITIL, because notice there's no service word in there. There's lots of things you can do inside of an organization to improve things that don't involve ITIL or discrete services. So don't get hung up on it. But take every day with the attitude of there's something we can actually get our hands around and have move the organization forward today. Those opportunities are all around us. These should be ongoing, targeted, customer-centric improvement initiatives. And where you need additional support, go get it. And with that, thank you for your attention on this, and I'll, whatever time we have for questions or the like, turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate all the good information. Today, before we go to the Q&A session, I wanted to push out our feedback form to you. And we appreciate if you take a few minutes to complete the feedback information form. And there's a box on the bottom where you can add more information on the polls that we took today as far as the HDI chapter. And there was a little technical glitch. We had a duplicate question in our presentation at the beginning. One question that we would like you to answer in the Q&A box, like we did before, is what are the topics you all want to hear about next year? That helps us to guide the speakers and determine what we can and cannot do. So with that, again, fill out your feedback form, and then we'll go on to the question and answer portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located below the media player and then click Submit. So we have a few questions out there, and the first one is for Sampath. Sampath, are you still there?
Yes, Rob, I'm here.
Okay, so the question to you, can you give us a scenario of automation in self-service and how it applies to proactive support?
Yes, absolutely. So the way we are thinking about our product with Nexus, Nexus today provides guidance to agents, and we are also shifting it and to be able to provide these Nexus guided paths to self-service. And the idea of building in automation is to figure out how to solve the problem that a lot of end customers have with self-service today. When you go in with self-service today, you end up with a bunch of different types of issues. One is you get too much information. You get information that are not relevant to you, and it's wading through a bunch of hits that you get on your search results. It's not personalized or tailored to you. So I think the use of automation here drives around a couple of things. One is, as a user, you come in and you enter a self-service scenario. The first step, the system in the background should have some automation to figure out your context. It knows information about you. It knows the previous things that you've tried, and it knows where you're coming from, so which part of the product you're coming from or what kind of questions you've seen before. So there's got to be automation that serves up a curated or a contextual self-care. So that's kind of one element, and I think that's what you should be looking for in any tool that you get. How much does it use context to provide the right type of self-service? And the second is this notion, and I want to take the broader theme that Ken talked about, which is the continuous improvement. And the continuous improvement as it applies here is to try to, the system should be smart enough, intelligent enough to figure out, based on a series of uses by the end user as well as by the agent community to solve a particular problem, it needs to learn the right and the best way to solve a particular problem and be able to serve that up. So that, again, is automation that needs to get built in and served up in a self-service fashion. So those are a couple of examples that I can think of, and Ken might have other ideas.
And I guess that goes along with Ken was saying earlier about speaking at the user level in that automation. Ken, we had a comment on one of your slides, and I didn't remember which slide it was on, but the comment was often if you took the response down to an individual level, you will have a variety across the organization too. Consistency.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure when that came in or what that was in relation to.
Yeah, and I was kind of watching these questions pop up, and I wrote down the slide, but it's not. So are there any other questions out there that you would like to ask? And if so, we'll give you just a few minutes to answer, to submit more questions. We are watching them, so feel free to put any more questions out there. And for those of you that are leaving you, I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar, Better Support Through Automation. Next month, for August, our webinar will be DevOps plus Knowledge Management, Using Knowledge to Increase Speed and Reducing Pain, with Dr. Adam Krob. So I'll give a few more minutes for anyone to ask any more questions.
Hey, Rob, this is Sampath. Can I just paraphrase the previous question you asked?
Sure.
For Ken. I think that the question related to the fact that, Ken, when you're mentioning you would need to take the response down to the individual level, and you had your pillar in the house with the customer satisfaction on top. I think the question referred to, if you take your response down to the individual consumer level, then how do you also ensure consistency across a variety of customers? I think that was kind of the implication of the question. It got cut off halfway.
Okay, that's actually a good point. So in the construction as consumer scenarios, it's not necessarily looking at it from an individual perspective, like a named customer. Look at it from a perspective of customer roles or responsibilities, which is actually one of the reasons why in the different questions, so location of a customer could be important, because one of the consumer scenarios is that, let's say you have 3 offices across the United States, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. So understanding that one of them happens to be in Chicago might be a way of actually constructing a scenario for everybody in the Chicago office gets dealt with on this type of service request like this, as opposed to the other 2 offices, which actually might have a more general set of responses that are part of their key plays. So it's a way of segmenting. So we don't necessarily want to go down to the individual, but rather something that's representative of classes of users or customers, because that helps us organize better as a provider and provide more tailored service, rather than having like a broad-based SLA or response plan that does, the old expression is, one size fits all does not fit any one size really well.
I think that's great, and I would just add to that, so that's a great answer from a service management perspective for your enterprise as an IT organization. If you're a support organization dealing with end customers, individuals, I would echo what you're saying, Ken, and also add, so I think figuring out the classes of customers or different types of customers is how you can serve them better, because you have consistency on one side of service delivery, but at the same time you're marrying that to some level of customization based on the type of customer they are. And one step beyond that is if it's a post-login type of experience and you do have the customer's permission to use the customer data, you can use that information to tailor the service maybe down at the individual level in certain instances. So I think you have to be careful about when you do it, and it has to be with explicit permission of the customer.
Great point, Sampath.
Well, guys, we thank both of you for joining us. This has been very informative for us. And on behalf of myself and our guest speakers, Sampath Gautam and Kenneth Gonzalez, we'd like to thank all the V chapter members for attending. And please don't forget to use our feedback form to give us feedback, and as well make suggestions for topics for next fiscal year, 2016. And with that, everyone have a great day.